As far as ranged single entities go, you don't really see the Necrofex Colossus nearly as much as something like, say, the Tomb King's Bone Giant, but it can be a solid pick. It does have some pretty clear downsides, though. Mainly it's a big target, not a ton of HP. Well, pretty close to 10,000. That's a decent bit, must be said, but only 75 armor. Big target, relatively slow. Here, Slade's got two of them, including the Regiment of Renown with its flamethrower here, and they're going to be walking into battle against the Dark Elves. For the rest of the army, he's got some Lamprey's Revenge, Rotting Prometheans, 3 Depth Guards, so a very tall and narrow army here from Vampire Coast. Looks like a bloated corpse there in the woods. Absolutely fantastic. We've got some Fellbats also in the air, so let's get things rolling as the Dark Elves move in. Got some infantry and a couple of Reaper bolt throwers. Those two shades getting chased around by the bloat in the forest. A Supreme Sorceress of Fire on a dragon. Very interesting choice. Did not see the fell bats initially coming in. They're going to get a beautiful engagement on the Reaper bolt throwers there. Yeah, some repeater crossbows and harpies moving in from the flank, but this Necrofex Colossus definitely showing one of its big downsides. It's a pretty big, expensive target. It can be easily counterfired by archers or artillery or basically anything else. Lamprey's Revenge also eat a little volley there from those shades, but right now they're just kind of hanging back using their shotguns to engage. The yeah, the bats managed to almost rout that Reaper Bolt Thrower. Not the best offensive stats, but the Flamethrower Necrofex is really going to be one of the main damage-dealing pieces here. Its shots are quite good against infantry, even if visually it could do with a little bit of an update. It's still absolutely glorious. Getting a nice hit there. Yeah, I don't know. Some might see a little bit of oddness with the magic. I am recording this after the hotfix, even though the battle was fought before it. Yeah, there might be some stuff going on because of that. But anyway, the Gallows Giant continuing to get some really nice engagements here and hits on the Black Ark Corsairs with that flaming attack. The Depth Guard going to now charge in. Anywhere the Depth Guard get these engagements against these Dark Elf units, they're going to do a great job against all these infantry, obviously. Bloated Corpse continuing to chase those shades, even if it doesn't get contact. Super cost-effective to basically be distracting like almost 2,000 points worth of ranged units that could be shooting these Necrofex Colossi. Our spike from Murderous Prowess does apply to range damage. The Gallows Giant not getting quite as good a contact there as the fire doesn't penetrate the same on those cavalry units, but even still, summon Deccan Mob is going to help defend here, as will Count Noctilus. This Necrofex Colossus, the non-Regiment of Renown, definitely suffering pretty badly. Shades are going to move into range, and their damage should be enough to take it down, not to mention there's still a Bolt Thrower online, which will, of course, pretty much be the end for that particular one, but that's okay. Dark Elves have really been focusing on the wrong one. The Gallows Giant is much more of a threat to the army they have. The burst damage is just very good, and the melee component is much better as well. I mean, not to mention the wounds, of course, but yeah, that might not seem like it. Of course, much shorter range, but that burnt contact effect and just the burst damage of the flamethrower makes it very scary for Dark Elves specifically, because their crossbow units have less range than a typical archer, right? So this is an interaction that has been something I've definitely taken advantage of throughout the course of Warhammer 2 and 3. When fighting this matchup, it almost makes this matchup a little bit Vampire Coast favored, in my opinion, actually, if you can use the Gallows Giant effectively, because 110 range is a pretty big downside. It does get outranged by shades, but not by a lot, only by about 20 range, so you can definitely work around that, with mobility or different build types here. Slade just providing target saturation with the other, the other Necrofex Colossus. He's also got the Lamprey's Revenge, of course, which could potentially soak some damage that may have gone into the Necrofex Colossus. But we'll get in close and watch as a few of these Lamprey's Revenge duel with the Supreme Sorceress here. They're going to do some nice damage with their shotguns and melee attacks. Armor piercing up close. Depth Guard also, their speed allows them to kind of run around here and DPS various units down very efficiently. Like I said, any infantry will just get out-traded. Anything other than, like, Hargadeath Executioners, which if you're taking those in this matchup, you're bound to have some other problems. like this one right here. This is going to be a big problem if you take Argonauts. Executioners in this matchup, it would be one of many, and there's many things that will murder elite infantry on the Vampire Coast roster. But that leadership effect here, even though the contact isn't nearly as good on cavalry, leadership effect there is hopefully enough to rout those Dark Riders. They're just fighting regular zombies and hit by that, and that's almost enough. But here we see the Supreme Sorceress I had been ignoring in the background, and she gets circle beaten by crabs. And Count Noctilus using his magic and halberd try and finish her off with the loss of their leader, the Dark Elf player here. And again, I think that Pit of Shades might have actually gone on those shades, into the Pit of Shades, yes. The Dark Elf player is going to throw in the towel here, and that will be the end. I mean, it was pretty hopeless for them, regardless. Just pretty much had one unit of Shades, and the other one had been running around being chased by a bloated corpse the entire game, which, again, even though it got 0 value, technically, it actually got like 950 value, because it basically removed this Shade from the battle the entire time, which is just amazing. Yeah, the rest of the build here, Depth Guard performed pretty well, just blending through this nice wide Dark Elf army. This is often a response to sort of the firepower. Like, if you try and go in different directions as the Dark Elves, you can often just get shot to pieces as from the Vampire Coast. This is sort of a response to that response, right? Very all-in kind of rush build. The double Necrofex, Gallows Giant, 16,000 at damage dealt, even though it doesn't technically pay for itself. Again, just the high volume of damage, 229 kills against a Horde build like this, super, super impactful, and definitely can be good in a number of other matchups. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But Lamprey's Revenge also an MVP here, just tanking and dishing out damage to various high-value targets. The Dark Elf side, there's going to be not that many units that perform to cost. We get one Black Arc Corsair doing quite nice, and the one Shade that does get involved does get some nice value. Definitely a dangerous unit in this matchup and one to watch out for. Yeah, the Dark Elves taking a nice variety of ranged units. I guess the one Reaper Bolt Thrower also does pay for itself. It makes sense, but yeah, I probably would change the lore of magic here, or maybe even take like Barathi or someone else. I'm not sure. Yeah, Noctilus being able to support with his summons and magic can be quite beneficial. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the Gallows Giant just to finish things up here. My favorite unit on the Vampire Coast roster, which, you know, that's not saying a lot, but yeah, 2,000 points. It's fairly expensive, but of course that burnt leadership effect, which does apply in melee, also deals fire damage for the niche situations where you might need it in a matchup like, let's say, for example, Nurgle. I don't actually know if I've ever played this matchup, because so many matchups in this game now that it's like, I might have played it once or twice, but thinking about things, it seems like it'd be a pretty tough one for Vampire Coast as their rosters are currently constructed. They probably have a hard time dealing with a lot of things here, but the fire damage from the Necrofex Colossus and the fact that it could potentially, you know, do some high burst damage to some various units, let's definitely see playing into this matchup here. And the main thing to look for in a matchup is the range units, right? We talked about specifically the range of the Dark Elves, giving them a hard time in this matchup, right? 125 for Dark Shards, 130 for Shades, right? Max, you get like 145 for the Bolt Fiends, Regiment of Renown, but really the range and mid-range is not great, right? You can get outranged pretty easily, so that short range of the Gallows Giant's not so much of an issue. You think about other similar matchups, right? Beastmen, potentially. Ungor Raiders could be pretty dangerous here, although again, only 115 range. They're likely to come at you with a lot of numbers, although likely more numbers of mobile kind of cavalry and stuff, where that flamethrower attack might not be so effective, so maybe you skip the Beastmen, and you could sort of apply that same thinking to all these different factions, right? Like Chaos Dwarfs, probably not. Dwarfs, Empire, definitely not, or Cathay. Greenskins is an interesting one, because the Air Boys, again, 140 range is good. I mean, it's not incredible, but it is enough, and they can bring a pretty good volume of fire that could have some problems. This is definitely a matchup, though, where that burnt leadership effect can definitely come in super clutch, so this is another one where I would absolutely recommend taking the Gallows Giant. Horn's an interesting one. I mean, they don't have fire resistance, per se, and, yeah, being able to not get shot at all is definitely a benefit, but I don't think it has the melee stats to stand up against a lot of what Khorne can bring. This is a matchup where you might want to skip. I don't know. There's also a matchup I haven't played a ton, to be honest. Haven't really played a lot of Vampire Coast in Game 3, but seems like it could be tough on a number of instances, although maybe not with the right build construction. You might be able to just generate a volume of fire that's so high, Khorne would have a hard time breaking through. We'll see. Maybe I'll play a little bit of Vampire Coast into some of these Monogods matchups and let you know results. Norska's an interesting one, definitely, and we'll kind of... I'm not going to go through every faction, but just to finish up with this, again, sort of my line of thinking here. The Javelins, short range, they actually get outranged by the Gallows Giant, but their DPS is so high that if you do get caught in range, you're basically going to die in a handful of volleys. So, yeah, the fire damage is also pretty beneficial here. This is one that might be a little bit situational. It depends on your build. You definitely want to have tools to kill the Javelin Hunters if you need to. Although, again, I think this is a matchup... I don't know. And I have to... like, my gut instinct tells me that Coast with the right build construction actually is really scary for Norska, but at the same time, Norska's speed and aggressiveness might kind of overwhelm a lot of Vampire Coast builds, so it's interesting. Definitely interesting to kind of theory craft and think about, especially with so many matchups in the game right now. Tell me down in the comments below, have you used the Gallows Giant much? In what matchups have you had success? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. It's been my absolute pleasure. If you're not subscribed, please do. I sincerely appreciate it. Be sure to like the video as well. Thanks again. See you next time.